Welcome to my channel. My name is Adina. I'm an intuitive astrologer. In this video, we will be going over the energy for the full moon in Aries that we are having September 29th, 2023. And so for the first portion of this video, I will get into all of the energy. I will pull up the chart for the full moon. And then for the second portion, we will get into all 12 rising signs. And that way you're able to see, the parts of your chart that are being activated by this full moon. Now, before I pull up the chart, I do want to go over a few things. So for those of you who are not aware, we are now entering eclipse season. We have the North Node in Aries. And so where this full moon is not an eclipse, it is extremely powerful and can hold that kind of potent energy of an eclipse. Now we have the North Node in Aries. And so what this full moon can activate is something new showing up for you. The North Node represents new beginnings, new activations, new energy coming in to shift and change your direction in some way. Now, the North Node is a magnetic, it's almost like this magnetic pull you have. Now, the transiting nodes can show up a little bit differently than the nodes in your natal chart. Now, in your natal chart where you have your north and south node, this can indicate, your purpose, your journey, your mission in this lifetime. The south node representing an area of life that is very known, whether you've accumulated knowledge in that area of your life through past lives, but it's known and it's what's comfortable. The north node in your chart is a direction that you are moving into in this lifetime. It is new, it is very fated, very karmic, and really is a part of your mission, your purpose, and your journey in this lifetime. The nodes and eclipses are very fated karmic energy. And so when we're working with the North Node, that is why we can have, new energies showing up for us to really push us into a new direction. Now, if you've watched my moon videos before, you would have heard me talk about, now this video is actually a little bit different than the ones I usually do. Sometimes I pull up the chart and I kind of connect with you all like this, which I like to do every once in a while. And then sometimes I just do audio. With this one, I really wanted to pull the chart up though, because there's so much going on that I kind of wanted to walk you all through. But when I work with the moons, the intentions you set at the time of the new moon in a specific sign tend to come to fruition at the time of the full moon 6 months later in that same sign. Now, the interesting thing about this full moon is that back in March and April in Aries season, we had 2 new moons in Aries. So I have my notes here. Just if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. So we had a new moon in Aries at 0 degrees back March 21st, 2023. We also had the very first solar eclipse in Aries back April 20th of 2023. That was the first eclipse to really start this brand new nodal cycle in Aries and Libra. So we are finalizing, we are shifting out of the nodes being in Taurus and Scorpio, which the nodes shifted into Aries and Libra back in July. However, in October, we will have our final eclipse in Taurus, which I will make a separate video going deep into all of that energy. But there's going to be a finalizing, a closing out of the energy, the experiences, the situations, whatever you've been changing in your life, whatever you've been moving through since February of 2022, there's a final closing out of all of that. And again, we'll get into that in a separate video. But the solar eclipse that we had back in April 20th of 2023, that was our first initial eclipse to shift and change us into this new nodal cycle of the North Node being in Aries. Now, I did post a video about the nodes being in Aries and Libra. It's on my channel. If you want to check that out, I'll actually maybe post it up here somewhere if I can. But you can check that out if you want to get an idea of how that energy is showing up for you. But what I want you to do is think back to the end of March and even through April. What were you trying to initiate back then? What were you trying to get going? What was showing up for you? How were you feeling? What was your mindset back then? There's going to be a part of that story showing up now where this can be a culmination point. There can be something more to the story, because remember, we have the nodes in Aries and Libra until January 2025. So there's more to the story showing up for you with this nodal journey. With this, even though this full moon is not an eclipse, it's in Aries, so it's part of the story. And so you want to check, which we'll get into when we get into all 12 rising signs, but you want to see where this is showing up in your birth chart, because this is going to show you where new energy is showing up for you. Now, you also want to check and see if you have any personal planets or points around the 6-degree mark of Aries, which I'm going to pull the chart up here in a few seconds and we'll go through that. But before I do that, I just want you to check your natal chart and see what your house, where you have Aries, if you have any personal planets or points around that 6-degree mark. This energy is going to be working with you more personally and activating those personal planets and points. Now, your personal points are your ascendant, your descendant, your midheaven, and your IC. Your personal planets are your 2 luminaries, so your sun and your moon, your Mercury placement, your Venus placement, your Mars placement, and even your Jupiter and Saturn. However, Mercury, Venus, and Mars are more personal. And so those ones you can really feel a lot more intensely. Okay, so now we are going to pull up the chart and we will walk through some of that energy that we will be moving through with this full moon in Aries. Okay, so here is the chart for the full moon in Aries. It is at 6 degrees and 0 minutes, which I find quite interesting that it's 0 minutes. It's not all the time we have a newer full moon right at that 0 degree point. Now, it's not 0 degrees, 0 minutes, because it moves so fast. But another thing I really wanted to mention too is that new moon we had back in Aries at 0 degrees would have been right here, and it was at 0 degrees. The new moon solar eclipse we had in Aries was at 29 degrees. And so those new moons we had back in March and April were at critical degree points, 0 and 29 degrees. These are called anaretic. Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to. Anaretic degree points. They're very potent, where the 0 degrees signifies a major beginnings and something new. And that 29th degree can signify, a wrapping up, a getting ready to transition into the next sign. And so we're working with both that brand new energy and that wrapping up energy, that finalizing, which I find is quite interesting with this full moon. So I would love to hear in the comments below, what is showing up with you, what is showing up for you with this full moon in Aries, because I just find it so interesting that with this full moon in Aries, where it's a culmination point of the new moons, and we're working with 2 new moons, at that 0 degrees and at that 29th degree, this is something that doesn't happen all the time. And so just for my own research purposes, I would love to hear your stories with this moon journey. So now let's take a look at the dispositor of this new moon, which is the ruler of this new moon, which is Mars. Mars is right here at 21 degrees of Libra. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Mars is almost conjunct the south node. This indicates that a lot of energy with this full moon is going to be about releasing and letting something go. Now, Mars can sever things. So there can be experiences showing up with this. There can be situations. There can be, a certain type of energy showing up for you, or something coming up that you're having to work through, or even bringing a better understanding to release and let something or someone go. I've talked a lot about, and if you actually watch the video of the North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra, energy, that, generally speaking, the North Node being in Aries is very much an energy of people stepping into their personal power, self-development, self-discovery, personal growth is very much what we will see a lot of with this North Node in Aries energy. So with this full moon happening in Aries, it's very much almost activating that, triggering something around those themes and topics. Now, with Mars being the dispositor of the North Node, the dispositor of this full moon being conjunct the South Node, which indicates something being released and let go of, this is where I feel, and in Libra, oh, right. I didn't get into right. So the North Node in Aries being that personal growth, self-development, but the South Node in Libra is very much of us becoming aware of individuals in our life. This is going to have a lot to do with releasing and letting go of certain personal connections and relationships, becoming aware of people in your life that are no longer in alignment, that have been blocking you in some way. And there's going to be a final releasing and letting go of those individuals. And so with Mars conjunct the, only a couple degrees away, but conjunct the south node, something can be showing up at this time where it's coming to your awareness. And now you have that, more of an understanding of who in your life you have to let go of. Maybe who in your life is not there for, a part that is a part of your journey, a part of your purpose that's not meant to, travel along with you on your journey any longer. And Mars is forming an in conjunction to Uranus retrograde in Taurus, which brings in, this very unexpected, shocking element to this energy. Whatever is showing up for you, it can be quick, it can be fast, it can be unexpected, it can be shocking. So we do want to be mindful of that. Now, at the same time, we have Mars in a sextile to Venus. Venus is also still in that square to Uranus retrograde. And Venus is still not out of her post-shadow period. She will not be out of post-shadow until she reaches 29 degrees, because she's stationed at 28 degrees of Leo. That's when she's stationed retrograde. And so Venus is still in her post-shadow period. So there can be something else showing up that you were already kind of working through over the past couple of months, or maybe there were certain things showing up, maybe arguments with certain individuals on and off that has been almost really consistent. And then there's like a final kind of blow up. I mean, it can show up in that way for sure. But with this energy, with this sextiles, sextiles are very much an energy where we have to take action. It can be opportunities, and it's something that really requires us to take action, and Venus at this time is in this trine to the North Node. And this really speaks to me as, something happening, something showing up for you where you, like I said, have a better understanding of who and what is no longer in alignment, and kind of knowing, okay, I have to release and let this go if I want to move into this North Node energy. If I want to really focus on myself and, grow spiritually, physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, I mean, all of it, right? For our whole, a holistic health. I can't think of the proper word, but you know what I mean? When we want to be, healthy as a whole, our environment and the people that we have in our life is extremely important. And sometimes there can be people in our life that hold us back in some way. And this can very much, be you understanding, who those people are or what those situations, experiences, circumstances can be. One more thing I want to note before we finish up with the full moon chart is that we have had Pluto in this ongoing T-square between the nodes. Now, it is not exact. It is not intense the way it has been the last few months. I posted a chart. I posted a video months ago going into this energy where there was this, really intense feeling of, which direction should I move in? And Pluto represents transformation and really getting to the bottom of, whatever it is you're moving through, bringing that all to the surface so that you can work through it, transmute it, and transform. And that's very much that Pluto energy. Now, Mars is approaching to a square, because Mars is approaching the South Node, and it's not a close square to Pluto, but it's still there and it can still be felt, especially for certain people, depending on your personal planets or points in your specific chart. So I did just want to note that, there can be something here where, and I think you'll feel this too, intuitively, if you go within, whatever it is, because this is showing up for all of us differently, right? We all move through these energies, similar, but in our own way. And like I said, whatever is showing up for you at this time, it's coming to the forefront so you can be aware of what needs to be released, let go of, and that opens a door for you for transformation. And I think that can be really beautiful, where sometimes in the moment these things can feel really difficult and challenging, especially when we are having to change, when we're having to release and let go of certain things. But that's when we really open the door for major transformation and personal growth. So it can be exciting too if we look at it in that way. So I hope that this helps you move through the full moon energy. I hope this gives you an idea of some things, some experiences, that can be showing up for you. I think this is a really beautiful energy for focusing on the self, personal growth, self-development. And then once we get into all 12 rising signs, I'll be able to tell you, the certain houses. So the timestamps will be below for your rising sign. And this is going to give you an idea of the areas of life that this energy, or the area of life. But I mean, it kind of works with Aries and the Libra axis. And this will give you an idea of, the areas of life that this is showing up for you. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope this helps you kind of move through this energy and get an idea of how to utilize this energy. Personal growth, self. Aries represents the self. This is time to work on you. And also, don't forget, think back to March and April. What were you going through? What was showing up for you? This can be a culmination point, but this can also be another stepping stone to that story. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and I will connect with you in the next one. Now let's get into all 12 rising signs. Aries, you have this full moon happening in your first house. And so the first house represents you, your persona, your character, your appearance, your physical body, how you view this physical reality, your perception, how others perceive you. Now you have the North Node in your first house until January 2025, meaning that the South Node is moving through your 7th house of relationships, close personal connections, one-on-one partnerships. So this full moon is really activating new energy to show up for you in these areas of life. So if there's anything that you've been moving through, or that even showed up for you back in March and April, when we had those initial new moons, but the nodes shifted in July, but it really would have started back at that time in March and April, when we had that first solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Aries. So you do want to check and see if you have any personal planets or points in Aries, also in Libra. But this full moon is really bringing new energy in for you when it has to do with your personal growth, when it has to do with this new direction that you are moving into, and even when it has to do with releasing and letting go of those people in your life that are no longer in alignment with you. Now, because Mars is the dispositor of this full moon, Mars is in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. Venus is also the ruler of the South Node, and Venus is currently in your 5th house of creativity, passion, romance, pleasure, what you really truly love to do, what you need, want, and desire in this lifetime, everything you do that makes you happy, that is in your 5th house. Also, children reside in the 5th house. And so there can be more showing up for you around that, where maybe there's something even too, because Venus is squaring Uranus currently. So there can be something very unexpected showing up for you around those themes and topics, where it can be an argument. It could have something to do with children. It could have something to do with your creativity, or what you truly need, want, love, and desire, and passion, and romance, and all of that. But it can be very unexpected because it has that Uranian element to it. And maybe something very unexpected is showing up for you that's giving you an understanding of who in your life you need to release and let go of. Taurus, you have this full moon happening in your 12th house. Now, the 12th house represents spirituality, places that are hidden, like asylums, hospitals, retreat centers. The 12th house also is associated with our self-undoing behaviors, also the subconscious. That's very karmic. And so with this full moon being in your 12th house, this can really activate maybe you wanting to step into your spiritual practice a little bit more. Now, you have the North Node moving through your 12th house until January of 2025, and the South Node will be moving through your 6th house. So which is your daily routine, your work routine, your health, what you do day to day. All of your routines reside in the 6th house. So there may be something you're wanting to shift and change with your daily routine, maybe too, that has to do with your health. Maybe you're focusing more on your health. Maybe there's certain, health. Maybe there are certain things you used to do day to day, whether it's your eating habits, nutrition habits, workout routine that you're wanting to shift and change. Maybe you're wanting to let something go because it's the South Node. We're releasing something. We're letting something go. It could be, awful nutrition habits, maybe, eating a lot of junk food, something like that. It could definitely show up in that way, but it could be you releasing, something very toxic that maybe you did on a day-to-day basis and focusing more on your spiritual practice, focusing more on developing your energy, heightening that energy, focusing on your frequencies, your vibrations. And this full moon can really activate that for you. Now, Venus is the ruler of the South Node currently, and Mars is going to be conjunct the South Node. And so Mars is in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. You currently have Venus in your 4th house of home and family. So Venus at this time is going to be square Uranus. And so this can really be a time where something is showing up for you very unexpected within your home and family that you're having to address. This could even be something very unexpected showing up for you that really shifts you into this new direction. And it can have to do with home and family and your day-to-day routines. Gemini, you have this full moon happening in your 11th house of friends and friendship, social groups, social media, online connections, your hopes and dreams. Now you have the North Node moving through your 1st house or your 11th house and the South Node moving through your 5th house. So there's going to be a lot of changes in these areas of life between now and January 2025. Now, if you think back to that new moon we had, well, both those new moons we had, March 21st and April 20th, we're at that 0 degrees of Aries and 29th degree of Aries. What was showing up for you then? Was there something you were trying to get moving, get going, something new? There's more to that story coming in. So this could be, maybe you wanting to start some type of online business. We currently have Venus in your 3rd house. Now, Venus is the ruler of Libra. The dispositor of this full moon is Mars, and Mars is in Libra. So we are also working with this Venusian energy as well. And Venus being in your 3rd house, which represents communication, speaking, reading, writing, community, neighbors. There can be something with those themes and topics showing up for you that maybe you're wanting to push into and implement into that 11th house, whether it's, maybe communicating and doing something online or with a friend. There's something here that's new that is showing up for you that's going to play out. This is more to the story. And so think back to, what was showing up back in the spring and Aries season. What were you trying to get going, or what were you thinking about, getting started and getting going? There's more energy coming in for that to really start to focus on, those themes and topics. Cancer, you have this full moon happening in your 10th house of career, public reputation, the legacy you leave behind after your working years. Now, we have the North Node in Aries, the South Node in Libra. And so between now and January 2025, you're going through massive changes, in your career sector and also your home and family, where maybe too, you're releasing and letting something go within the home and family and bringing in something new within your career. And so this full moon can activate more of that new energy showing up for you, within your career. Now, you currently have Venus in Leo in your 2nd house of money and finances. Venus is forming a square to Uranus. And so there can be something very unexpected showing up, with money and finances around this time that you just want to be mindful of and aware of. But this can also even to bring something very unexpected that's shifting and changing your direction in some way that at the end of the day, where if you're having to release and let go of something now, it can push you in this new direction into your career where you eventually can make more money, if that makes sense. So it can really be some beautiful energy. It's one of those things where sometimes you have to go through it first to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. Leo, you have this full moon in Aries happening in your 9th house of higher education, higher knowledge, long distance travel, philosophy, belief systems. And so you actually will have the North Node moving through your 9th house, this area of your life, until January 2025, and the South Node in Libra in your 3rd house until January 2025. And so if you think back to March and April, when we had those 2 new moons in Aries, what were you trying to initiate, or what were you even thinking about initiating? What were the thoughts you were having? What was something new that was showing up for you back then? There's more to the story, showing up now with this full moon. Now, this is something that's going to play out over a matter, basically till January 2025, because even though this is not an eclipse, it holds that energy, and we have the North Node in Aries. So it's more to this nodal story that's going to play out for you until January 2025. And so if you've been thinking of traveling, if you've been focusing more on traveling or going back to school or taking a course, or even shifting and changing your belief systems in some way, something new can show up for you around this full moon. Now, you currently have Venus moving through your first house, and Venus is going to be forming a square to Uranus at this time. And we also have Mars, the dispositor of this full moon, in Libra, which is ruled by Venus. So Venus is a key player too in this full moon, and Venus squaring Uranus, which is, Venus in your first house, Uranus in your 10th house of career. There can be something very unexpected showing up within your career that you're having to address. And so just something to be mindful at this time. And this can also, even too, I'm feeling intuitively, where something can be showing up for you that's actually shifting and changing you towards these 9th house themes and topics, if that makes sense. So for example, it could be maybe something changing within your job and you're having to move, something like that, or something changing within your job and you're taking a course, something along those lines. Virgo, you have this full moon happening in your 8th house of your partner's finances, money coming in from outside resources, like taxes, inheritance. This is also the house of psychological healing and transformation. It has this death and rebirth energy. And so you will have the North Node moving through your 8th house until January 2025, and the South Node moving through your 2nd house of money and finances and material possessions. And so between now and January 2025, you are going through, massive changes, through your money houses. And this full moon can really activate more of that energy for you, whether it's, something showing up within your partner's finances, whether it is, even I find client work can sometimes come through the 7th and the 8th house, if that's something that aligns with you, that you resonate with. This can also have to do with loans, taxes. This can have to do with, like I said, psychological healing and transformation in some way. Now, one thing I want to know is that if you think back to the end of March 21st and April 20th, when we had the new moons in Aries, what was showing up for you back then? What were you trying to implement? What were you trying to get moving at that time, especially when it had to do with your money? There can be more to that story playing out that will continue to play out until January 2025. This is just a stepping stone. This is a milestone on this journey. And so, just be mindful, or not be mindful, but pay attention to what is showing up for you around your money, around, money coming into with your partner's finances and stuff like that, because there's more to that story. Now, Venus is currently in your 12th house of spirituality, places that are hidden, like hospitals, asylums, retreat centers, but also self-undoing and self-sabotaging behaviors and patterns. And so, Venus is forming a square to Uranus. Venus is also a key player in this full moon because we have Mars, the dispositor of this full moon, in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. And Venus is the ruler of the South Node. And so there may be something also showing up at this time that you are having to release and let go of in order to kind of move into your North Node. Libra, you have this full moon happening in your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, close personal connections. Now, you currently have the South Node in your 1st house. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on you and your partnerships over until January 2025. And if you think back to March 21st and April 20th, when we had those 2 new moons in Aries, what was going on for you back then, especially with your relationships and close personal connections? There can be more of that energy coming in at this time, with the nodes moving through your 7th house and your 1st house. You're going through a lot of changes with your relationships. And this may have to do with you kind of releasing something that you hold on to, because it's the South Node in your 1st house. The 1st house represents you, your character, your personality, your perception of this reality, and your perception of the world and how others perceive you. And there may be something about you that you're wanting to let go of, that maybe you feel is just not in alignment with the direction you want to move in. And it can be to, maybe have to do with a relationship in some way. So there's more of that story playing out now. Mars is also in your first house. Mars is the dispositor of this full moon. Mars is in Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus, and you currently have Venus in your 11th house. And so there can be a lot of focus on those 11th house topics, like online social media, your online connections, your friends, your friendships. But Venus is also forming a square to Uranus. And so there's something very unexpected showing up in this area where you're having to, and you know what, I'm even feeling intuitively, this may also have to do with some type of online business. So if you do client work, so with the North Node being in Aries in your 7th, this doesn't just have to be a relationship. Clients also reside in the 7th house. And so you may be focusing a lot more on, clients, online business, if that's something that aligns with you, because it can definitely play out in this way. And so when we have at this full moon, because Venus and Uranus are squaring each other, there can be, something unexpected showing up between money coming in from outside resources, which is like clients, and your online business that you're maybe having to address. So just something to be mindful of. Scorpio, you have this full moon happening in your 6th house of work, health, and daily routine. And so, having the North Node moving through your 6th house, work, health, and daily routine is definitely going to be more of a focus, between now and January 2025. Having the South Node in your 12th house, which is spirituality, self-undoing, self-sabotaging, our subconscious. This can be an energy where maybe you are becoming aware of those self-undoing behaviors and patterns and releasing those, and focusing more on a healthy daily routine. That can definitely show up in that way, Scorpio. Now, the ruler of this full moon is Mars. Mars is currently conjunct the South Node in your 12th house in Libra, but Libra is ruled by Venus. Venus is currently in your 10th house of career, which is shifting and changing this energy into your work and your career. And so work and career and your daily routine is going to be, big focus, a major focus, and highlighted with this full moon. Now, Venus is going to be forming a square to Uranus, which Uranus is in Taurus in your 7th house of relationships and partnerships and close personal connections. So there may be something very unexpected showing up that you're having to work through or address when it has to do with people in your life, that may be even affecting your career in some way. Again, this could show up as client work, something along those lines. So there may be something that you have to release and let go of, because remember, Venus is the dispositor of the South Node as well. There may be something, a relationship or people in your life or something that's going on with clients and work that you're having to release and let go of in order to kind of make these shifts and changes in with your daily routine and work and health and all of that. Sagittarius, you have this full moon happening in your 5th house of passion and play and pleasure and romance and children. And so this full moon is really highlighting these themes and topics for you. Now, you also have the North Node moving through this area of your life through the 5th house until January 2025. And so if you think back to March 21st and April 20th, when we had those 2 new moons in Aries, what were you trying to get going, around your creativity or around children or romance or hobbies or interests? What were you focusing on back then? Because there's more to that story showing up for you now with this full moon. This is like a stepping stone on this nodal journey and this eclipse journey, because even though this is not an eclipse, we have the North Node in Aries, so it holds that power of an eclipse, and it really is bringing in new energy for this journey for you. Now, there's going to be a lot of shifts and changes between that 5th and 11th house, between now and January 2025, while you have the North Node in the 5th house and the South Node in the 11th house. And the 11th house represents your friends and friendships and online connections, social groups, your hopes, your dreams. There may be something you have to release in that area of life in order to move into that 5th house, the creativity, children, romance, your hobbies, your interests, and what you really want to try and get going. Now, Venus is currently in Leo, which is in your 9th house. Venus is the dispositor of the South Node. And because Mars, the ruler of this full moon, is conjunct the South Node in Libra, Venus is also a player in this full moon energy. So Venus being in your 9th house of higher education, higher knowledge, long distance travel, belief systems, philosophy. Venus is squaring Uranus in your 6th house of daily routine, work and health and nutrition habits. So there may be something showing up for you in those areas of life that you're realizing maybe you need to release and let go of, that maybe they're not in alignment with you. So just something to be mindful of and aware of. Capricorn, you have this full moon happening in your 4th house of home and family. Now, you also have the North Node moving through your 4th house of home and family until January 2025, meaning that the South Node is moving through your 10th house of career and public reputation until January 2025. So these areas of life are going through massive changes, between now and January 2025. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but there may be more of a focus on home and family. This could even maybe be you releasing a job or deciding you want to work from home. And this can play out over the next year and a half. But if you think back to March 21st and April 20th, when we had those 2 new moons in Aries, what was starting for you? What were you trying to get moving back then, especially around home and family and work? Especially around home and family, because that solar eclipse we had in Aries would have started triggering and highlighting those 4th house themes and topics, such as home and family, bringing your focus to home and family. And so there's more of that energy showing up for you with this full moon. Now, the ruler of this full moon is Mars. Mars is in Libra in your 10th house of career. So there can also be something showing up around your career too at this time. Now, Libra is ruled by Venus. You currently have Venus in the 8th house of your partner's finances, money coming in from outside resources, and Venus is forming a square to Uranus. So this is actually, I'm feeling from this, there can be something very unexpected showing up around your career that you're having to address. Maybe even something showing up where now you have a final understanding of what you need to release and let go of. Aquarius, you have this full moon happening in your 3rd house of community, neighbors, neighborhood, siblings, cousins, communication, reading, speaking, writing, and vehicles. Now you have the North Node moving through your 3rd house until January 2025, and the South Node moving through your 9th house also, which your 9th house until January 2025, but your 9th house also represents higher education, higher knowledge, long distance travel, belief systems, philosophy. And so those themes and topics are all going through massive changes, over the next year and a half. But if you think back to March 21st or April 20th, around that time frame, when we had those 2 new moons in Aries, what were you trying to get going? What were you trying to get started? What were you thinking about implementing? What was showing up for you back then? There's more to the story showing up now with this full moon in Aries. This is something that's going to play out over the next year and a half, but there's definitely more energy coming in for you. Now, Mars is the ruler of this full moon, and Mars is currently in Libra, almost conjunct that South Node. So something may be showing up at this time, where you have an understanding of what needs to be released and let go of in order to move in this new direction. It can definitely show up, Venus is the ruler of Libra, and Venus is currently in your 7th house of relationships, partnerships, and close personal connections. So there can definitely be something showing up with people in your life where maybe you now have an understanding of who needs to be kind of released and let go of in order to take these new steps, in order to move in this new direction. At the time of this full moon, Venus is going to be square Uranus. So something can show up very unexpected around people in your life that's kind of giving you a better understanding, of the direction that you want to move in and will be moving in, over the next year and a half. Pisces, you have this full moon in Aries happening in your 2nd house of money, finances, and material possessions. Now you have the North Node moving through this 2nd house until January 2025, meaning that the South Node is moving through your 8th house of your partner's finances, money coming in from outside resources, taxes, inheritance, and psychological healing and transformation. And so these areas of life are going through massive changes over the next year and a half. If you think back to March 21st of this year, 2023, and April 20th, when we had those 2 new moons in Aries, what was showing up for you? What was new that was coming in? What were you thinking about implementing? You know, especially around your money. There's more of that energy showing up for you. Now, Mars is the ruler, the dispositor of this full moon, and Mars is currently in Libra, you know, almost conjunct that south node. So there can be something showing up at this time around money or your partner's finances, or maybe commitments like loans, taxes, you know, something, inheritance, you know, something like that that you're having to release and let go of. Now, Venus is the ruler of Libra, and Venus is currently in your 6th house of work, health, and daily routine. And now Venus is also forming a square to Uranus, which is in your 3rd house. But there can be something very unexpected showing up with maybe your partner's finances, or something very unexpected showing up around money coming in from outside resources in some way, that you're having to shift and change your daily routine, if that makes sense. So there's something here that can show up, you know, unexpected, whether it's with your daily routine or money coming in from outside resources. You're having to address, you're having to shift that energy a little bit. But all in all, a Pisces, this energy, this is more to this kind of nodal story that is playing out for you in, you know, these money houses until January 2025.